Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name's Dave, and this is episode 902B, and today's date is February 24th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Warning, Something Major is About to Happen in the Middle East. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we see the battle between the U.S. government, FBI, and Apple. It's continuing. We know that the FBI, U.S. government, they want complete access. They want some type of portal, backdoor, into Apple's products so they can spy on the people. Of course, they're saying it's just the one phone. But by the way, the phone that they're talking about is the phone from his business. It's not his personal phone that they're trying to get into. This is the phone where the FBI told his employer, hey, you know what? Change the password and this locked them out of the iCloud. Now, was that done on purpose? Most likely, because they're trying to push an agenda. But there was a survey done, and 55% of Americans think the government would use the ability to unlock phones if they got access. And they think that the U.S. government, FBI, should not have access under any circumstances, because they're afraid eventually they will use this to spy on the American people. And I completely agree with this. This is exactly what they would be doing. Now, an interesting story came up where there was this person named Tyson who was in Camarillo. He went to a board meeting, and he said he lived there. He was a resident. And it turned out that he was an actor from Beverly Hills. And he was sent there, and it was for this construction project, to basically criticize what was going on there. He was handed a script, and he was put into this position. And the organization that hires these people is called Crowds on Demand. Now, we've seen this a lot with crisis actors for different events where they put it out, and there's groups that have these actors ready to go. And by the way, this Crowds on Demand, there's about 20,000 actors that are subscribed who belong to this organization, which they use on local level, on the state level, and there are many other types of these companies all around the U.S. And what this guy said, Tyson, is that they hired me. We have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And Adam Swart, the CEO of the company, basically wrote the scripted lines for him. And basically, he was being used to sway city officials in meetings across the country. All these actors, this is what they do, depending on who hires them. Now, state officials, politicians, for their campaigns, they do hire these people. And it's not illegal to do so. It's not against the law. But I think people should be told up front that this person is an actor. It's not someone who cares about the issues, and they're put into place for a one-sided argument. So is this a little misleading and not transparent at all? Yes. And we see that this same type of thing goes on in the false flag events, where they hire crisis actors to come on in, play the part, and then it's spread all over the TV and the news. And we saw it in Sandy Hook. We saw it in the Boston bombing. And we're made to believe that these people are real when they're really not. Now, the U.S. government, the U.S. military, they funded a study, and they are ready to go with a new system where they hook into Twitter, and they can predict whether you're going to join a protest movement just by looking at your tweets. A study carried out by researchers at Arizona State University, Texas, and Yahoo, funded in part by the U.S. Military Office of Naval Research, looked at 2,686 Twitter posts to create a system that will reliably spot future online protesters. But what's more worrying about this is this algorithm would give governments an upper leg over political dissidents they do not like. And we discussed this many times before. The government, the people in power, are more afraid of you, me, than anything else. Because the people, millions of people, who are in rooms talking about how they dislike the government, how the government is not working for the people, putting together organizations, they don't want this to happen. That's why they don't want you to have encryption. Encryption is almost like back in the day when the Founding Fathers were gathering in a pub or a small meeting area where the government didn't know about it, and they talked about creating a new nation. Well, with encryption, you can do this over thousands of miles, where you can have people talk in private, where the government can't figure out what you're saying. And this is what they don't like. This is why they're using social media and all these algorithms to figure out who's doing what, who's talking to who, which groups they need to look at, because they're very nervous about this. Then add weapons into the picture. This is a scary scenario for them. This is what they're worried about. This is why they're trying to disarm the people. This is why they're spying on the people. Because they want full control. They're never going to just say, okay, I'm stepping down. Sorry, I wasn't working for the people. No, they're going to try to hold on to their power. They're going to try to stop those people who believe that they're corrupt, those people that believe that we should remove the government, those people that believe that we should have a different government, those people that believe the government is not working for the people. This is what they're trying to stop. They're trying to stop all of those people who believe this. This is why you hear domestic terrorism. This is why you hear extremist groups. This is why they're coming out with all these things, because they're trying to get a handle, and they're trying to spy on everyone to understand what everyone is thinking, what they're talking about, and who they need to look at and keep an eye on. Now, what's very interesting is that Amnesty International has put out a report saying that war crimes and other violations of the laws of war were committed in almost 20 countries in the past year, including Burundi, Israel, and many other countries. Many governments are also unlawfully targeting activists, legal workers, and other human rights defenders, partly due to rising global security threats. Instead of recognizing the crucial role these people play in society, many governments, guess what they're doing? They're deliberately setting out to strangle criticism in their country. So they've broken their own laws in their crackdowns against citizens. And this is coming from the Amnesty International report, saying that governments, they don't want these people speaking out, and they're deliberately shutting them up. And this is happening in 20 different countries. And I'm sure it's happening in many, many more. It's happening here right in the United States. It's happening in Canada. It's happening throughout Europe and Australia. Now, think about this for a second. A population where the government can crack down on people because they don't like what they're saying, that does not have weapons to defend their freedom of speech, that is a controlled population. That is a population where the government can make them do whatever they want. They can throw them in prison. They can kill them. But a population that has a weapon in their hands can say, no, you cannot do this. We are a force, and we will not go quietly. You'll have to listen to us. And this is what the Founding Fathers were talking about. This is why they had freedom of the speech, and they backed it up with the Second Amendment. Now, out in North Korea, we understand the U.S. and many of the private Western Central Bank countries have been pushing the idea that North Korea has some type of hydrogen bomb. They detonated it underground. And of course, there's no evidence whatsoever that they actually did this. There's no radiation. There's absolutely nothing. All we saw was an earthquake. But they used the propaganda to increase their military budgets, to bring in new weapons. And the U.S. was discussing bringing in the THAAD anti-ballistic missile system to South Korea. So John Kerry is out there and says that the United States, they want to use diplomacy. And they really don't want to deploy the THAAD anti-ballistic missile system to South Korea. And we'll use diplomacy as soon as North Korea agrees to denuclearization. So once they do that, then we'll use diplomatic measures. Well, no, that's an ultimatum. That's not having diplomacy. Get rid of your nuclear projects, and then we'll talk. No, it's going in there and talking about all the issues. But again, the United States doesn't want to do this. They're just using this to make it seem like they want a diplomatic solution. They just gave North Korea an ultimatum. And you know North Korea is going to say, well, no, we're not going to do that. Let's talk about everything that's going on here. And the U.S. is going to say, no, I don't think so. Now, we see the corporate media is making a very big deal about China and the islands they own, where they're saying there's air defense missile systems on there. Now they're saying that China has deployed fighter jets to the island. Now, I've seen the satellite imagery. They're black and white. We've reported this in a couple of reports back. They're blurry. They're black smudges on the island. They could be trucks. Are they air defense systems? I don't know. It's hard to see because they're not using the full color 3D satellite imagery that they use for everything else. If you notice, in Syria, when they wanted to point out that Russia had their fighter jets on the runway, they gave us some nice, beautiful color 3D satellite imagery, and we saw every detail. For China, they're giving us the black and white, zoomed out version of this. But they're making a very big deal. Now, you have to remember, they're using the bully tactic, where they're encircling China, bringing in more missile systems, setting up more Patriot missiles in South Korea. They want to bring in the THAAD system. They made a deal with the Philippines. They want to create this new base in Japan to bring in advanced weaponry. And China sees this happening. Now, does China have weapons on the islands? First of all, it's not confirmed. The U.S., if they actually really had proof, it'd be plastered with beautiful color 3D satellite imagery. When they're using propaganda, they use the zoomed out type of version where they tell you this is what they think. And if you look at a lot of it, it says possibly, probably, not a definite. But China does have every right to put this on the island because they own the islands. And the U.S. is basically trying to force them into doing this. Remember, these are air defense systems. Just like in Eastern Europe, when the U.S. put the missile shield there, what was Russia supposed to do? I mean, they know the U.S. was saying, oh, it's not for Russia, it's for Iran. But really, when the P5+1 deal went through, the missile shield stayed, and it's pointing at Russia. So Russia is going to take precautions. So out in Iraq, we see that Turkey still has troops in Iraq, and Iraq is saying, you know something, we need you to remove your troops. This is absolutely ridiculous. You're in a sovereign nation, and you have no right to be here. But again, Turkey doesn't listen. They're taking their orders from the United States government, central bankers, and if they say keep the troops there, they're going to stay. If they tell Turkey to continually shelling into Syria, they're going to do it. And as they're telling them to do it, the U.S. is going to deny they're telling them to do it, and they're going to say, please back off. Please don't do this. But when Russia brings up the draft to the UN Security Council to have Turkey stop shelling into Syria, the West rejects it. And this is how you know it's propaganda in the corporate media and everything they're saying to the people. Because in the back rooms, in the dark halls, we see what's really going on. We see in Libya, the Islamic State, the proxy army for the United States government central bankers, they are continually recruiting more fighters there, trying to build up the forces, and they're trying to create the situation where the coalition forces will need to go into Libya. Now, remember, they want the unity government in there because the unity government will give them permission to go into Libya. Right now, Paris, they're already conducting covert anti-Daesh operations. Anti-Daesh is Islamic State. And basically what they're doing is not fighting the Islamic State. They're fighting those people who oppose the puppet government. So the French Special Forces and the U.S. Special Forces and other special forces are already inside of Libya. And we can see what's happening right now. They're clearing the way, getting ready for some type of military action inside Libya. We know in Italy, on the island of Sicily, they've given permission to have the drones, to have drone missions into Libya. And we see all this coming together now. Now, the Syrian Foreign Ministry says, listen, any group in Syria that violates the ceasefire is going to be regarded as terrorists. Now, this new ceasefire deal that's supposed to go into full force on February 27th, this Saturday, this is causing the Syrian peace talks to be delayed until March. So they're not going to have the full-on peace talks until March at this point. Now, the Pentagon is out there saying even though there's this ceasefire and a cooperation with Russia, this will not lead to further cooperation with Russia down the line. So they're already letting us know that they're not going to cooperate anytime past this. So Russia is taking steps to defuse the situation once again in Syria. Turkey is continually shelling. Russia wants an appraisal of Turkey's shelling into Syria. They're calling on international human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders, and other organizations to give their official assessment on what Turkey is actually doing and who they are actually shelling. Now, we know the answer to this, but this is a good way to prove what they're actually doing. And I know some of these organizations, they're not really on the up and up. But we're hoping by getting the majority of them in there, we can see what's really going on. And we know what's going on. They're trying to keep the corridor open to supply the Islamic State, because this ceasefire has nothing to do with the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra. It has to do with what? The one rebel guy that they're using to say these are the rebels? Because you know what happens. They switch back and forth. Oh, we're the moderate rebels. Oh, no, we're the terrorist group. And they do this so often that you can't make heads or tail of this. So basically, they're all terrorists. And the U.S. knows this. And they're using this to their advantage at this point. Now remember, John Kerry has already said they have a plan B. Now, are they going to push this plan? Well, they're going to try. Is it going to work? I don't know at this point, because we already hear Syria saying, listen, we object to this plan B where you're going to try to split up the country and partition it. They said, first of all, The territorial integrity of Syria is dear to every person in Syria. We want to keep it as a whole. And the Security Council Resolution 2254 insists on the territorial integrity and unity of Syria, and the Syrian people will never accept the partition of the country. So we can see already this is completely a no-go, and we can see John Kerry is putting this out there because we know in the past Ashton Carter, Joe Biden was pushing the same idea with Iraq. Didn't get any traction. They're putting this out there once again because, as we know, they want to take the Middle East and they want to split it into Shiite, Sunni, and Kurds. And this is what they're trying to push. And they're going to continually try to push this. So, what is happening right now in Syria? Well, the U.S. is going to use this time because, as we know, humanitarian aid is going to be moving into Syria, and they're going to use this time to basically rearm the terrorists, because the terrorists are not part of this. And they'll say this is humanitarian aid. It's going into the town where there's al-Nusra and the moderate rebels, and you know a lot of this is going to go to the terrorists because there's only one moderate rebel. And they're going to use this time to basically rearm the terrorists. So we're going to have to watch this situation very, very carefully. Now, out in other parts of the Middle East, we see very interesting things happening right now. Kuwait, Qatar, they have issued travel warnings against Lebanon. Now, Saudi Arabia has already issued these alerts, and they halted a $4 billion grant to Lebanon. And they're saying we're not in harmony with the ties between the two countries. So something is happening in this area, and we see Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates and other countries putting up this warning. Qatar is saying they would like all their people to leave Lebanon right now, and the other countries are saying the same exact thing. United Arab Emirates, they're pulling out their ground troops right now from Yemen. So at this point, we can see something is about to happen inside this area. Now, is Lebanon falling apart very quickly? Are the people rising up, pushing the puppet government out? Is the United States, with the coalition forces, basically getting the troops together to mount a major offensive in this whole entire area? Because it's starting to look like that right now. And it looks like they're using this time in Syria, using this time to create some other type of incident, because we just don't get these warnings for no reason. Now, of course, it's not published all over the corporate media. The government's not telling everyone that this is happening at this point. But when we look at these type of things, we know maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the next day, most likely in a couple weeks or a month, something will happen. We've seen this before. And we are seeing it once again. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.